the sun was setting over the endless Arabian dunes, turning the sand into waves of gold and fire. Inside his black luxury SUV, Sheikh Zahir Al-Mansour sat in silence, staring at the horizon that once symbolized his kingdom, vast, powerful, untouchable. But that evening, as the desert wind howled, he saw something that shattered the illusion of control he'd built his life upon. A figure, small, fragile, and trembling, stood alone by the side of the empty desert road. A woman. Her clothes were torn, her hair matted with sand, her eyes red from tears and exhaustion. She looked like she'd been walking for hours under the brutal sun. Without thinking, Zahir stopped the car. For a man known for ruthlessness, it was an act that surprised even himself. When he stepped out and approached, she flinched. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I didn't steal anything. I swear." Her words hit him harder than the wind. She thought he was there to hurt her. He took off his sunglasses slowly. "You're safe," he said in a calm, deep voice. "What are you doing out here?" Her name was Emily. She was an American woman who had come to the Gulf chasing a job that turned out to be a lie. Trapped, betrayed, and left behind by the people who promised to help her, she'd wandered into the desert trying to reach the nearest town, until her strength gave out. Zahir stood there in disbelief. A billionaire surrounded by people who worshipped his wealth, and yet here was someone who had nothing. Nothing but her courage. Without another word, he opened the door of his SUV. "Get in," he said. She hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" He looked at her, his gaze unreadable. "Because I can." When she finally stepped inside, the car's cool air felt like salvation. Zahir drove in silence, stealing glances at her through the mirror. Her hands shook as she tried to drink water, and every tremor struck something deep inside him, something he thought money had erased long ago. That night, he took her to his private villa on the outskirts of Riyadh. His staff gasped when he arrived carrying the half-conscious woman in his arms. "Prepare a room," he ordered, "and food. Now." They obeyed without question. Nobody dared challenge the sheikh. But when he turned away from the luxury and the marble halls, his thoughts were tangled. Why did this stranger matter to him? He watched through the glass wall as she ate, slowly regaining color in her cheeks. Something in her vulnerability reminded him of a truth he had buried. Once, long ago, before he became a man of billions and pride, he had known fear too. That night, he couldn't sleep. Her image, sitting at the table, eyes full of quiet gratitude, stayed in his mind. For the first time in years, he felt more human than powerful. The next morning, Emily woke to find the sheikh already waiting outside her door. "You need clothes," he said simply, handing her a bag. "And you'll stay here until you recover." Her eyes widened. "I can't. I don't belong here." Zahir crossed his arms. "You almost died in the desert, Miss Emily. That gives me the right to make sure you don't do something foolish again." There was something commanding about his tone, but also something protective. She wanted to refuse, but exhaustion won. "Fine," she murmured. "Just for a few days." He nodded once. "Good." Days turned into weeks. Emily healed, and the palace that once felt like a prison to Zahir began to feel alive again. She would walk barefoot through the garden, sketching the palms and fountains, or sit by the balcony watching the sunrise. She didn't see wealth the way others did. She saw beauty in the smallest things. Zahir began finding excuses to see her, asking for tea, walking through the gardens, even joining her at the stables. She didn't treat him like a sheikh. She treated him like a man. One afternoon, she laughed at something he said, the sound echoing like music across the marble courtyard. He froze, realizing he hadn't heard laughter like that in years, pure, uncalculated, real. But word travels fast, even within golden walls. His advisors warned him, "She's a distraction, Your Excellency. People are talking." Zahir didn't care. Because deep down, he knew what he had found in that desert was not weakness. It was his salvation. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more powerful and inspiring stories like this one to you. The air above the desert shimmered like liquid fire. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, painting the dunes in blinding gold and endless silence. Sheikh Zahir al-Mansour's convoy had just left his private estate on the outskirts of Abu Dhabi when he ordered his driver to stop. He had seen movement, a flicker of something human against the monotony of sand. "Wait," Zahir said, lowering his sunglasses. "Stop the car." The tires crunched to a halt. His driver hesitated. "Your Excellency, it's probably a mirage." "Do as I said." Zahir stepped out, the dry wind slapping his face, carrying the sting of sand. In the distance, half-collapsed beside a rusted signpost, was a woman. Her hair clung to her face, her clothes torn and dust-covered. She wasn't moving. He approached cautiously. The woman stirred, blinking up at him through the glare. Her lips were cracked, her voice barely audible. "Water." He knelt beside her, uncharacteristically gentle. "Don't speak. Here." He opened his canteen, holding it to her trembling hands. She drank greedily, coughing between gulps, tears of relief spilling down her cheeks. When she finally looked at him, confusion crossed her face. "Are you real?" Zahir almost smiled. "Unfortunately for both of us, yes." Her name was Emily Carter, a traveler from the United States, she explained once her voice steadied. She had come to Dubai chasing a job that vanished upon arrival. Promised employment, left stranded by her contact, and robbed of her passport by people she thought were helping her, she'd wandered into the desert out of desperation, trying to find the highway. Zahir listened in silence. Beneath his polished restraint, something shifted. A memory, perhaps, of what hunger and fear once felt like before wealth had numbed him to such things. "Can you stand?" he asked. She tried, failed, and nearly fell. Instinctively, he caught her arm. Her skin was warm from the sun, her pulse frantic beneath his fingers. "You'll come with me," he said. "I can't," she whispered. "I don't even know who you are." He straightened, his dark robe snapping in the wind. "Then consider yourself lucky." His security guards exchanged uneasy glances as he carried the woman to the SUV himself, something the Sheikh of Al-Mansour never did. When they reached his private villa, whispers followed like desert ghosts. Sheikh Zahir brought a stranger from the dunes. A foreigner. American. Why would he care? The servants rushed to prepare a guest suite. Zahir ordered food, medicine, and privacy. "No one disturbs her," he said sharply. That night, he stood outside her room, watching through the partially open door. Emily lay asleep, her face softened by rest, hair spread over white sheets like spilled ink. For a moment, the powerful sheikh who ruled over half of the region's oil distribution felt something unexpected, humility. The next morning, she woke to find him sitting near the window, drinking tea as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Morning," she murmured. "Are you my doctor?" He raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like one?" "You don't look like someone who picks up strangers in the desert either," she said quietly. He set his cup down. "You're alive. That's what matters." "Why?" she asked after a pause. "Why would a man like you help me?" Zahir stood and approached the window, staring out at the desert stretching infinitely beyond. "Because I could," he said. "And because no one helped me when I needed it." She frowned. "You don't look like someone who ever needed help." He turned his gaze to her, something dark and human flickering behind his composure. "Appearances deceive, Miss Carter. You should know that better than anyone." The following days passed quietly. Emily regained her strength, though she remained restless. The palace intimidated her, golden halls, servants who avoided eye contact, the sheer weight of silence. But Zahir, for reasons she couldn't understand, kept visiting her. Sometimes he asked questions about her life in America. Other times he simply listened. One afternoon, she found him outside by the stables, feeding one of the Arabian horses. "You have a whole palace and you still come here?" she asked. He shrugged. "They don't ask for anything except honesty." She smiled faintly. "That's rare." He looked at her for a long moment. Rarity is what makes something valuable. Her cheeks warmed under his gaze, but before she could reply, one of his advisors hurried over, bowing low. "Your Excellency, we must discuss the press issue." Reporters have found out about the woman. Zahir's expression hardened. Let them talk. Sir, your reputation can burn, he interrupted. I don't owe them explanations. Emily lowered her head, guilt washing over her. You don't have to defend me, she whispered once the advisor left. He turned back to her, his voice low and steady. I'm not defending you, Emily. I'm defending what's right. That evening, the sky turned crimson as the call to prayer echoed faintly in the distance. Emily stood on the balcony outside her room, watching the horizon. Zahir joined her silently. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, she said, back home, no one would believe this. The desert, the sheikh, the kindness. He gave a soft chuckle. Back home, no one would believe you survived walking through this desert either. She looked up at him. Why do you always sound like you're hiding something? He hesitated. Maybe because I am. Their eyes met. The wind carried the scent of sand and night. For a heartbeat, time held still. And then, a knock broke the silence, a servant announcing the arrival of the royal council. Zahir's face closed off instantly. I have to go. As he turned away, Emily caught his sleeve. Thank you, for everything. He paused. Don't thank me yet, he said softly, his tone unreadable. The world doesn't forgive kindness easily. When he left, Emily stood there, staring into the desert, unaware that the moment she stepped into his life, she had set off a chain of events that would test the sheikh's power, pride, and heart more than anything before. Because that night, the world outside the palace walls was already whispering her name, and not kindly. By the third week after Emily's rescue, the palace was no longer the same. The corridors buzzed with soft conversations that stopped when Zahir entered the room. Servants who once moved with quiet confidence now averted their eyes, and even the advisors who'd built their fortunes under his power approached him with visible hesitation. It wasn't because of a political scandal or a business failure. It was because of her. The foreigner. The poor American woman who had stumbled out of the desert and into the heart of the sheikh's life. That morning, Zahir stood by the tall glass windows of his study, staring at the desert beyond. The horizon was painted in muted gold, stretching endlessly like time itself. But his peace was fractured by the sound of approaching footsteps. His advisor, Khaled, entered the room. Your Excellency, the council requests an urgent meeting. The rumors are spreading faster than we can contain them. Zahir didn't turn around. Rumors are for those who have nothing better to do. Perhaps, Khaled said carefully, but this time it's different. The press has begun asking questions. They've seen her. A foreign woman staying under your roof, guarded, fed, and protected. They're asking if she is your mistress. The silence that followed was heavy. Zahir's jaw tightened, his reflection in the window sharp as a blade. Summon the council, he said finally. If they want answers, they'll have them. When Zahir walked into the grand hall, the council members rose from their seats. The room, lined with marble and gold, seemed colder than usual. Khaled spoke first. Your Excellency, with respect, this situation cannot continue. The woman's presence is tarnishing your image. The people. The people? Zahir interrupted. Do they sleep under my roof? Do they know my intentions? Sheikh Zahir, another councilman interjected, our nation thrives on reputation. Compassion is noble, but a ruler must remain above question. Zahir's gaze swept the room like a storm. And what kind of ruler abandons a woman dying in the desert? The council fell silent. He turned to leave, his words echoing behind him. If they wish to speak of honor, let them first define it. Emily, unaware of the meeting, sat by the palace gardens, sketching in a small notebook she had found. She was surrounded by silence, the kind that made her wonder if she truly belonged there. When she looked up, Zahir was standing at the edge of the courtyard, watching her. His expression was unreadable. You shouldn't be out here alone, he said. She smiled faintly. I'm not alone. You have guards watching me from every corner. He almost smiled back. For your safety. Or your reputation? She asked softly. Zahir froze. For a moment, the power, the pride, the control, all of it faltered. You've heard, he said quietly. Everyone whispers, she replied. Even the walls. He took a slow breath and sat across from her. You don't understand how fragile things are in this world. A single rumor can undo years of work, destroy entire alliances. My name, my family's name. She looked up from her notebook. Then send me away. Her voice trembled as she said it, but her eyes didn't. I've caused you trouble, she continued. You saved my life. I owe you everything, but I can't let you lose everything because of me. Zahir stared at her, the words striking deeper than he wanted to admit. For years, people had begged to stay close to him, for power, for wealth, for opportunity. And yet, here was a woman who wanted to leave, not for herself, but for him. You think I care about what they say? He asked, his voice low. I think you care more than you want to, she said softly. Zahir leaned back, his expression hardening. You speak like someone who's never held power. And you speak like someone who's afraid of losing it, she replied. Her words hung in the air. No one had ever dared speak to him like that. Not his advisors, not his rivals, not even his family. He stood abruptly. You're wrong, he said. Power means nothing without purpose. Then what's your purpose? She asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked away. But that question stayed with him long after her voice faded. That night, Zahir couldn't sleep. The desert winds rattled the palace windows like restless spirits. He stood on his balcony, watching the moon cast silver light over the dunes. In the distance, the faint call to prayer echoed from a nearby village, a reminder of faith, humility, and everything he'd lost chasing greatness. He thought about Emily's words. About how she looked at him, not with fear or admiration, but with understanding. When morning came, he made a decision. Emily was packing her small bag when he entered her room. You're leaving? He asked quietly. She turned, startled. I thought it was best. He nodded slowly, then took a step closer. If you wish to leave, I won't stop you. But not because of them. Not because of fear. Her eyes softened. Then why? He paused, struggling for words. Because staying here may put you in danger. And because, he hesitated. Because I don't trust myself to keep distance anymore. The air between them grew heavy. Emily looked up, her heart racing. What do you mean? Zahir's voice dropped to a whisper. You remind me of who I was before power silenced my heart. She swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. Then maybe that's not something you should run from. Zahir exhaled slowly, his composure breaking for the first time. You don't understand. The world I live in doesn't forgive weakness or love. Maybe it's not love that needs forgiveness, she said. Maybe it's pride. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, the distance between Sheikh and stranger disappeared. Then, as if waking from a dream, Zahir stepped back. Go, he said softly, before I change my mind. Emily hesitated, tears welling in her eyes. If I go, will I ever see you again? He didn't answer. But when she left, walking through the golden gates of the palace, Zahir's heart followed. And for the first time in his life, the man who had everything realized what it meant to lose something priceless. 2 months passed since Emily left the palace, and in those long weeks, Sheikh Zahir Al-Mansour had built walls around his heart higher than the marble ones protecting his estate. The scandal had faded from the headlines, replaced by new controversies and gossip. Yet, when the night was silent and the desert wind carried whispers through the corridors, her voice returned to him, soft, defiant, unforgettable. He threw himself into work. Meetings, negotiations, new oil contracts, and international partnerships filled every hour. On the outside, he was the same powerful man he had always been. But inside, something had changed. One evening, Khaled entered his office with a folder. Your Excellency, we've received another partnership proposal from an American development group. They wish to meet personally. Zahir glanced at the papers without interest. Decline. I have no reason to. He stopped. A name on the page caught his eye. Emily Carter. He froze. Who signed this? Khaled looked confused. Miss Emily Carter. She represents the NGO, Havenworks, seeking funding for housing and education programs in rural areas. She requested the meeting directly with you. Zahir leaned back in his chair, silent. His heart thudded once, slow, deliberate. Schedule it, he said. The next morning, the air in the palace conference room was charged with tension. Emily stood near the window, wearing a simple beige dress, her hair tied back. She looked stronger, more confident, yet her eyes still carried that same warmth that had once disarmed him. When Zahir entered, the guards and aides fell silent. His presence filled the room like gravity. "Miss Carter," he said evenly. "It's been some time." She nodded politely. "Thank you for agreeing to meet, Your Excellency." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She sat, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "I'm not here to reopen the past," she began. "I came because this project can change lives. We've been building shelters for displaced families near the border. But funding is drying up. You're one of the few who could help." Zahir's gaze didn't waver. "Why come to me?" "Because," she said, her tone calm but firm, "you're not the man people think you are. You care. You proved that once." Her words hit him harder than she knew. For a moment, his expression faltered, the mask slipping. He leaned forward. "You believe I care about your cause?" "I believe you care about people," she said simply. Silence stretched between them, heavy, electric. Finally, Zahir exhaled. "You have a week. Stay in the city. I'll send my advisors to review your proposal." Emily's brow furrowed. "A week? I thought you would at least." "I said a week," he interrupted coldly. Her jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Then I'll wait." That evening, as the desert cooled under the moonlight, Zahir found himself alone in the garden, replaying every word of their meeting. She hadn't asked for forgiveness. She hadn't begged. She'd stood before him as an equal, and that, more than anything, unsettled him. For years, he had been surrounded by people who bowed and flattered. But Emily had always been the one who challenged him, who saw the man behind the sheikh. The next day, he surprised himself by visiting the construction site where her NGO worked. The scene was unlike anything he had expected. Dozens of families living in tents, children running barefoot through the sand, volunteers carrying supplies. And there she was, Emily, sleeves rolled up, helping an old woman fix a broken tarp. She didn't see him at first. Watching her, something inside him twisted. This woman, once fragile and lost, now stood as a symbol of resilience. When she finally turned, her eyes widened slightly. "You came." He shrugged. "I was curious." She smiled faintly. "Curiosity suits you better than arrogance." He almost laughed. "You still speak like someone who's not afraid of me." "I'm not," she said simply. "I never was." They walked together through the site, and for the first time in months, Zahir saw the world beyond his empire, the forgotten faces, the silent suffering. "These people," he murmured, "they have nothing." Emily nodded. "That's why I'm here. Not because I want to save them, but because I understand them. I was one of them once." He looked at her then, something raw in his gaze. "And what do you see when you look at me?" She stopped walking. "A man who's forgotten what it feels like to be one of them." The words stung. But beneath the pain, there was truth, and he knew it. That night, Zahir sat alone in his study, staring at the documents she had left behind. He saw not numbers, not profit, but people. Faces. Source. And something in him shifted. When dawn came, he made a decision that would shock his entire council. He signed a partnership agreement, personally pledging millions to fund her program, but not through his name. It would be anonymous. Because for the first time, he didn't want credit. He wanted change. A week later, Emily was preparing to leave when his car pulled up beside her. The door opened, and Zahir stepped out, dressed in casual linen, a rare sight. "You funded the project," she said, smiling knowingly. "They told me." He gave a small shrug. "Perhaps someone believed in your vision." Her eyes softened. "Why hide it?" He met her gaze steadily. "Because it's not about me anymore." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind danced around them, carrying whispers of the desert. Then Zahir said quietly, "You once told me pride is what needs forgiveness. I think I finally understand." Emily's voice trembled. "And what now?" He smiled faintly. "Now, perhaps, I begin to live like a man, not a sheik." As the sun rose over the horizon, painting gold across the sands, Emily realized that the man who had once saved her from the desert had found his own salvation, through humility, compassion, and love. Because sometimes, the richest man in the world has to lose everything, including his pride, to find what truly matters. The palace was unusually tense that morning. The moment Sheikh Zahir's signature on the donation papers became known, ripples of disbelief spread through the corridors like wildfire. By noon, every member of his council had gathered, demanding answers. The headlines were already spreading across the Middle East. Sheikh Al-Mansour donates millions to Western charity. Is the sheikh losing grip on his empire? Zahir sat at the head of the long mahogany table, silent as his advisors erupted into arguments. "This decision undermines your position," one shouted. "You are funding foreigners while local businesses beg for aid. This Emily Carter woman is manipulating you," another accused. "You can't risk the family's legacy for her." Zahir's hand came down hard on the table, silencing the room. His dark eyes blazed. "Enough." The weight of his voice filled the chamber. "You think this is about a woman? You think compassion weakens me? Then perhaps you've forgotten what strength truly means." Khaled, his most trusted advisor, spoke cautiously. "Your Excellency, people follow power, not sentiment. The board is questioning whether your leadership still serves the interests of the Al-Mansour family." Zahir stood, straight-backed and calm. "The board can do what it wants. I lead this empire, not them." He turned to leave, but Khaled's next words froze him mid-step. "The Royal Investment Council is considering intervention. They might appoint someone else to oversee your holdings temporarily." The implication was clear. They were moving to strip him of control. Zahir's gaze hardened. They wouldn't dare. But deep down he knew they would. That night, Zahir paced the balcony of his private quarters. Below, the city lights shimmered like 1,000 stars scattered across the desert floor. For the first time in years, doubt gnawed at him. He'd built an empire from nothing. Oil, finance, trade, every deal, every signature, every victory had been his. But now, for choosing humanity over profit, his empire was beginning to turn against him. His phone buzzed. It was Emily. He hesitated before answering. "Zahir." Her voice was calm but urgent. "I heard what happened. The news, it's everywhere." "I'm aware," he said dryly. "I didn't mean for any of this," she continued. "You helped us anonymously, and somehow the press still found out. I should have." "You should stop apologizing," he interrupted. "You didn't cause this." "I did." There was a long pause. Then she asked softly, "Was it worth it?" He looked out at the city, the pulse of his world glowing beneath him. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I'd rather fall for doing something right than stand for something meaningless." Her silence carried a kind of quiet respect. "You're not alone in this," she said. He smiled bitterly. "I am Emily. Always have been." "Then let me prove you wrong," she whispered before hanging up. The next morning, his secretary announced that Emily was waiting outside the palace gates. Zahir frowned. "She came here?" "Yes, Your Excellency. She says it's urgent." Against his better judgment, he told them to let her in. When she entered his office, she was holding a folder filled with documents. "I came to return this," she said, placing it on his desk. "The donation agreement. If it costs you your position, I'll withdraw the funds. You can tell the world you made a mistake." Zahir stared at her, speechless. "You would give up everything for me?" She nodded. "You gave me my life once. Maybe it's time I return the favor." He shook his head, a mixture of frustration and admiration crossing his face. "You don't understand, Emily. If I accept that, it means they were right. That compassion is weakness. That doing good must always come second to power." She stepped closer. "Then show them it isn't. Show them that strength isn't measured in control, but in the courage to stand alone." Her words struck something deep in him, the same place her voice had reached the first day he found her in the desert. Zahir exhaled slowly. "You always find a way to challenge me." "It's easy," she said softly. "You're not as untouchable as you think." Later that day, he called for a live press conference. The council tried to stop him, but his decision was final. When the cameras went live, millions across the region tuned in. Zahir stood before them, regal and unshaken, though his heart beat violently beneath his chest. "I've heard what they say," he began, "that I've lost my way, that compassion has made me weak. But if mercy is weakness, then I accept it proudly." Gasps rippled through the crowd of reporters. "I was born with nothing," he continued, "and I rose not because I crushed others, but because I remembered those who had less. The woman whose name you've dragged through the mud, Emily Carter, reminded me that leadership without humanity is nothing but vanity." Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions, but Zahir kept speaking, his voice firm and clear. "If my empire crumbles because I chose kindness, then let it crumble. At least history will remember that I stood for something real." And with that, he turned and walked away from the podium, leaving chaos behind him. By evening, the palace was silent. The council had gone into emergency session. Some called him a fool. Others, a visionary. Zahir found himself once again on the balcony, this time with Emily beside him. She had stayed quietly after the conference, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon. "They'll come after you," she said quietly. "You know that, right?" He nodded. "Let them. You might lose everything," she whispered. He turned to her. "Maybe everything I thought mattered wasn't worth keeping." The wind brushed between them, carrying the faint scent of the desert, the place where their story began. "Do you regret saving me?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled, not with arrogance, but with peace. Not for a single breath. The sound of the city below faded into silence as they stood there, two souls from opposite worlds, bound not by wealth or power, but by something rarer, truth. And as the stars emerged one by one over the desert sky, Sheikh Zahir realized that for the first time in his life, he didn't need the world's approval to feel free. 3 days after the press conference, Sheikh Zahir al-Mansour's world began to fracture. The very men who once bowed to him now whispered behind his back. The international markets reacted first, shares in his oil conglomerate plummeted overnight, and rumors of corruption swirled like sandstorms across the desert. His enemies, long waiting in the shadows, saw their chance to strike. In the boardroom of Al-Mansour Holdings, chaos reigned. The same advisors who once called him visionary now called him reckless. "Your compassion is costing us billions," one shouted. "The royal fund is freezing our accounts," another warned. "This woman, this American, has ruined everything." Zahir sat in silence at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. But deep within, a storm brewed. When Khaled, his oldest friend and advisor, finally spoke, it was in a low, almost sorrowful tone. "Zahir, I've stood by you since the beginning. But they're moving faster than we can stop them. The royal court is calling for a full audit. They want to know why you gave away so much and to whom." Zahir rose slowly, his shadow stretching across the polished marble floor. "Let them come. Let them take what they want. I built this empire once, I can build again." Khaled shook his head. "This isn't just business anymore. It's blood. They'll come after your family's legacy. Your father's name." That name, Mansour, carried centuries of weight, but suddenly it felt lighter, emptier. That evening, Emily arrived at the palace unannounced. She had seen the headlines, "Arab Sheikh under fire for donation scandal." The guards hesitated at first, but Zahir himself appeared at the top of the marble staircase, dressed simply in a white shirt and dark slacks, looking nothing like the ruler of a billion-dollar empire. "Let her in," he said. As she approached, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the kind that comes not from lack of sleep, but from losing faith in everything you once stood for. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "I had to see you," she replied. "You're being destroyed for doing the right thing." He laughed bitterly. "The right thing rarely survives in this world." She took a step closer. Then we fight for it. He looked at her, half in disbelief. You think this is something you can fight? This isn't your small charity, Emily. These are men with power, with armies, with secrets that could bury us both. I don't care, she said firmly. You gave them a reason to fear you, not because of your wealth, but because of your humanity. And that's something they'll never forgive. Zahir's eyes softened. You speak as if you understand this world. I understand injustice, she said. And I know what it's like to be stepped on by people who think they're untouchable. You're not alone in this. Not anymore. For the first time in days, Zahir allowed himself to breathe. The sound of her voice, calm, defiant, unshakable, grounded him in a way nothing else could. The next day, the royal audit team arrived. Men in suits combed through the palace records, questioning every transaction, every deal. Zahir stood by silently, allowing them to work, knowing resistance would only make things worse. Emily watched from a distance, her chest tight with anger. When one of the inspectors sneered at Zahir's personal donation records and muttered something about Western women and their tricks, she stepped forward. Say that again, she said, her voice steady but trembling with fury. The man froze. Excuse me? You heard me, she said. You think a man like him would risk everything for a trick? He did what none of you had the courage to do, to care. The room fell silent. Zahir turned, his gaze locking with hers. For a moment, pride flickered in his eyes. Enough, he said to the inspector. She's right. You came here to find fault, but all you'll find is truth. That night, Zahir walked alone through the empty halls of his palace. The silence was deafening. He paused before a portrait of his late father, a stern man with eyes that seemed to judge even from the canvas. I'm sorry, Zahir whispered. I know what you taught me, that wealth must never bend, that mercy is weakness. But I can't live by that anymore. He turned as Emily entered quietly behind him. Talking to ghosts? She asked softly. He smiled faintly. Trying to make peace with them? Maybe it's time you make peace with yourself, she said. He looked at her, his voice heavy. You've changed everything, Emily. My world, my beliefs, even my enemies. But what if I can't protect you from what's coming? She reached for his hand. You don't have to protect me, Zahir. You just have to trust me. Days turned into weeks. The audit concluded, and the royal court summoned Zahir for a hearing in Riyadh. The outcome would determine his future, whether he would remain a sheikh or lose everything he'd ever built. Before he left, Emily found him in the courtyard, preparing to board his private jet. Promise me something, she said. What? That no matter what happens in there, you'll remember who you are, not the title, not the wealth. The man who saved a stranger in the desert and taught her how to live again. Zahir stepped closer. And what if they take everything? Then we start again, she said simply. Together. He looked at her for a long moment, then pressed his forehead against hers, a gesture of trust, of surrender. Together, he whispered. When the plane lifted off, the desert below stretched endlessly, vast, golden, eternal. Zahir closed his eyes and exhaled. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of losing his empire. Because somewhere between power and ruin, he had found something far greater. And as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the sands in light, the sheikh who once ruled nations finally understood the truth, that real strength was never about what you owned, but what you were willing to give away. The royal court of Riyadh was built to intimidate. Its golden domes gleamed under the morning sun, and the corridors were lined with portraits of kings and conquerors, men who had never known defeat. Sheikh Zahir al-Mansur had walked these halls many times before, but never like this. Today, he entered not as an untouchable magnate, but as a man accused of betraying his own empire. Dozens of dignitaries and council members filled the chamber, their robes whispering as they turned to watch him approach. Cameras flashed. Journalists murmured. The air smelled of tension and incense. Zahir took his seat at the long marble table, facing the royal ministers. His lawyers sat behind him, nervous and pale. But he didn't need them. He had already decided he would speak for himself. The High Minister rose. Sheikh Zahir Al-Mansour, you stand accused of financial mismanagement, unauthorized foreign donations, and acts that have brought disrepute to the Al-Mansour name. Do you deny these charges? Zahir looked him dead in the eye. No, I do not deny them. A ripple of shock swept through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. You admit guilt? The minister demanded. I admit, Zahir said calmly, that I gave money to people who needed it, that I used my wealth to build homes instead of towers, that I chose compassion over vanity. If that is guilt, then yes, I am guilty. Gasps echoed across the chamber. You disgrace your lineage, one elder counselor hissed. Your father. My father taught me strength, Zahir cut in. He never taught me mercy. I had to learn that myself. A heavy silence followed. Then from the back of the hall, a voice broke through, clear, female and trembling. Then let the world know what mercy truly looks like. All eyes turned. Emily Carter stood at the doorway, flanked by 2 guards. She was wearing a modest black dress, her hands clutching a folder close to her chest. Despite the fear in her eyes, she walked forward with purpose. The High Minister frowned. Who is this woman? She is the reason I'm here, Zahir said quietly. Let her speak. After a moment's hesitation, the minister nodded. Very well. You may speak, but be brief. Emily stepped up to the podium, her heart pounding so hard she thought her voice might fail her. But when she looked at Zahir, calm, proud, unbowed, her courage returned. My name is Emily Carter, she began. I represent an organization called Havenworks. We build homes for displaced families, families who lost everything to war, greed, and neglect. When I came to Sheikh Zahir, I didn't expect him to care. Men like him rarely do. But he did something no one else would. He helped. A murmur spread through the hall. He didn't ask for recognition, she continued. He didn't ask for power. He gave because he saw humanity where others saw profit. You call him a disgrace, but I call him a man brave enough to be human. The minister raised a hand. This is emotional rhetoric, not evidence. Emily's voice grew stronger. The evidence is in the lives he saved. Children who now sleep under roofs, mothers who no longer beg for water. I've seen them. I've held their hands. And every one of them knows his name, not as a sheikh, but as a savior. Zahir looked down, his jaw tightening. No one had ever defended him like this, not with fear, not with strategy, but with heart. The room was divided. Some nodded quietly. Others looked outraged. When Emily finished, she stepped back. You can strip him of his title, she said, her voice trembling now. But you'll never strip him of his worth. For a long time, no one spoke. Then the High Minister said, Leave the chamber. We will deliberate. As guards escorted her away, Emily's eyes met Zahir's one last time. In that silent exchange, everything was said, gratitude, love, defiance. Hours later, Zahir was summoned back. The chamber was smaller now, darker. The air felt heavy. The High Minister stood again. After review, the court has found Sheikh Zahir Al-Mansour guilty of unauthorized allocation of state resources. Effective immediately, your control over the Al-Mansour financial empire is suspended. The words landed like stones. But before the council could continue, the minister added something unexpected. However, given your acts of humanitarian contribution and the global recognition your charity has brought to our nation, you will not be stripped of your title. Instead, you are ordered to serve as an ambassador for economic reform, unpaid, for 2 years. A wave of astonished whispers swept the room. They hadn't destroyed him. They had transformed him. Zahir inclined his head slightly. Then I accept. The minister frowned. You show no anger at this outcome? No, Zahir said simply. For once, justice has served both man and conscience. Outside the court, reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs popped. Questions flew through the air. Are you no longer a billionaire? Will you return to power? What about the American woman? Zahir paused, giving them a rare, calm smile. Power is temporary. Character is not. As for the woman, He hesitated, then smiled faintly. She showed me that sometimes the greatest wealth is compassion. He walked past them without another word. Emily was waiting by the fountain outside, eyes red from tears. When she saw him, she rushed forward. What happened? He looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment, then softened. They took my empire, he said quietly. But they gave me a purpose. Her eyes filled with tears. Zahir. He reached out, brushing her cheek gently. You came into my life when I was blinded by pride. You taught me what no throne ever could, how to see. And then, for the first time since his downfall began, he smiled. Not the practiced smile of a sheik posing for cameras, but a real, human smile. As the sun dipped below the desert skyline, turning the city gold, Zahir and Emily stood side by side. Not ruler and servant, not billionaire and pauper, but equals, bound by the quiet victory of redemption. For in losing everything, Zahir had found the only thing that mattered.